Hi, my name's Leora, and when I was 17, my parents left me at a highway rest stop with $5 and a note that said, "Character is built when no one's watching." They called it a joke, a lesson. But that lesson didn't end at the rest stop. They erased me from the will. They rewrote the story. They even tried to sue me for not loving them enough. I kept quiet for years. But what happens when the silence becomes their weapon? And the truth is, the only thing you have left. Would you speak up? The wind barely pushed through the cracked windows of the Camry, the air inside thick with heat and words no one was saying out loud. My headphones were in, but nothing was playing. I just needed the illusion that I couldn't hear them. Mom tapped her nails against the console, a rhythm that always meant she was waiting for someone, usually me, to mess up. Dad gripped the steering wheel like it might float away if he let go. And in the front passenger seat, Marjorie flipped through her psychology textbook like it was gospel. She didn't glance back at me. She never really did. We were somewhere past Rifle, Colorado, pushing west on I-70, supposedly on our way back from Marjorie's campus tour. But I'd stopped keeping track of the route miles ago. The silence in that car had a weight to it, like wet clothes you couldn't take off. "Quick stop," Dad muttered. No one asked if I needed anything. He just pulled into the nearest rest area, dust flying off the pavement as we parked near the vending machines. There was nothing around but trees and cracked concrete. The place looked abandoned, like even the squirrels had decided to move on. I pulled my headphones off. "Bathroom break?" Mom turned in her seat, smiling that smile she saved for company and passive-aggressive conversations. "Why don't you grab us something cold, sweetie? A soda for your dad. Water for me." I didn't argue. I knew better. The minute you questioned anything in that car, the tone changed. It always started with disappointment, then spiraled into guilt. So I stepped out into the heat, grabbed my wallet from my hoodie pocket, and walked to the machines. The sun was brutal. My shoes stuck slightly to the asphalt with each step. I shoved a crumpled 5 into the slot, punched in the codes, and waited while the machine groaned like it was doing me a personal favor. The soda dropped with a clunk. The water, slower. I turned back toward the car and froze. There was no car, just empty space where it had been. No tire screech. No goodbye. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe they'd pulled around back. Or maybe Dad had gotten mad about something and was doing one of his dramatic loops. I walked forward, scanning the edges of the lot. Nothing but the buzz of insects and the occasional sound of a semi-truck passing far off. My phone buzzed. From Mom. Message: "Let's see how you get home. Don't call anyone. Learn something." My stomach dropped so fast, I thought I might vomit. I tried calling her. Straight to voicemail. Dad's number? Same. I tried again, and again. Each time, the line cut out like it couldn't be bothered. I looked around. The lot was still empty, the quiet growing louder with every second. A man in a truck glanced over. Too long. I backed up quickly, clutching the soda bottle like it could protect me. The heat pressed against me, thick and unmoving. I walked back toward the vending machines, my heart pounding, not knowing what the hell to do next. And then I saw it, taped to the side of the soda machine. A yellow post-it, slightly curled from the sun. $5. Don't waste it. Same handwriting as the notes she used to leave on my lunch napkins in middle school. Back when I still thought she was the kind of mom who would come through if things got bad enough. I didn't sit down. I couldn't. If I stopped moving, I might lose whatever hold I had left on the tiny sliver of control still inside me. My phone showed 17% battery, no charger, no backup. Just me in the middle of nowhere, with $5 and no one waiting for me anywhere. I tried to remember where the nearest bus stop might be. Maybe Glenwood, maybe Rifle. I wasn't even sure which direction we'd come from. The tears threatened, but I bit them back. This wasn't the first time they'd played a lesson on me, but it was the first time it felt this real, this final. "Maybe I deserved this," I whispered. A truck pulled in. Another guy, early 40s, glanced my way. My pulse kicked into overdrive. I ducked behind the machines, trying to look invisible. They left me. I kept repeating that in my head. They left me, not by accident, not out of anger. They did it, to see what I'd do. The vending machine hummed behind me. My fingers clenched the bottle so hard it warped under my grip. I didn't cry. Not yet. Crying was something you did when you believed someone might care. I looked out at the parking lot. Still empty, still hot. If this was their idea of love, of guidance, I wanted no part of it. If this was love, I didn't want it. But I didn't get to choose love, not when it was wired into me like survival. That memory, the heat, the silence, the sound of my footsteps on gravel as I walked back toward nothing, it stayed lodged behind my ribs like a shard of glass. Over the years, I trained myself not to pick at it, not to let it cut me open again. But it never dissolved. It just sat there, quietly reminding me where the line was drawn. Late last night, I was sorting through a drawer I hadn't opened in years, looking for a replacement charger, of all things. What I found instead was a notebook from college, tucked behind old receipts and half-dried pens. Wedged between the pages was a photo, me and Marjorie, taken just a few weeks before the test. She had her arm around me. My face was soft, still clinging to the idea that she might actually care. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I flipped it over. No caption. Just a smudge of ink, like someone had started to write something and thought better of it. And then it hit me. The exact second I remembered her face at the rest stop. Not a look of surprise when Dad told me to grab drinks. Not a trace of confusion when I walked off toward the machines. No hesitation. Just a smirk. Barely there, but clear now. As if she already knew what was about to happen and had decided to enjoy the show. It wasn't a test, it was theater. And I was the punchline. The next time I saw her was 5 years later at Thanksgiving. The whole family had gathered at my aunt's house outside Boulder. By then, I had a job, a shared apartment, and had mastered the art of not bringing anything real to the table, emotionally or otherwise. Dinner was winding down. People were laughing over pie. That's when Wendell, my father, lifted his wine glass and said, "Remember Leora's big independence lesson?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. Marjorie's eyes lit up. "Oh, you mean the $5 drop-off?" She chuckled. She made it home with more dignity than change. Isn't that something? The room burst into laughter. My aunt elbowed me gently. "You were always such a resilient little thing." I chewed slowly, swallowed. Let the burn settle in my chest. I could have said something right then. I could have flipped the table. But I just nodded like they'd earned the right to laugh. Like it was somehow noble to be turned into a cautionary tale at dessert. I stayed quiet through the rest of the night. Helped wash dishes. Hugged people goodbye. I even thanked Mom for the sweet potatoes. Then I went home and deleted every photo I had of that night. That was the last family event I ever attended. From that point on, I began collecting, not souvenirs, but proof. Screenshots of texts, voicemails that went from sweet to manipulative, casual slips in conversations where they told people they'd tough-loved me into greatness. Every piece went into a folder on a drive I kept encrypted, labeled simply, "Just in case." I wasn't angry, not then. I was just preparing, quietly building the only kind of armor they couldn't see. Back in my apartment today, I looked at that photo one more time. Marjorie's smirk, my soft face, the before and after of trust. Then I tapped and held, delete. A simple act, no rage, no ceremony. If history is written by the loudest voice, then I guess it's time I started speaking up. And if they didn't want their version questioned, maybe they should have thought twice before laughing at mine. I closed my laptop and walked across the studio to the archive shelves tucked into the back wall. It was quiet. Mid-morning, slow traffic outside. Just the faint buzz of my assistant humming to herself in the front office. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just needed to move my hands, sift through something physical, something I could control. My fingers grazed a napkin folded neatly between two leather-bound design journals. I recognized the print right away. Diner style, cheap and soft. There was a grease stain on one corner and a ballpoint scrawl on the back. "Come back soon, sweetheart. Be safe." My throat tightened, not from emotion, but from the flood of memory that came rushing up too fast. I was 17, stiff from walking, shoes cutting into my heels, skin sunburned in patches. The vending machines had spit out 2 bottles for $5. No change, of course, and I hadn't had the nerve to ask anyone for help. Not at first. I walked alongside the road until the shoulder widened enough to feel like a choice instead of a punishment. After a few miles, I reached a gas station where I asked to use the bathroom and bought a bottle of water with my last coins. I lingered outside, pretending to wait for someone. I told the attendant my parents were running late. I remember him squinting at me, his lips tightening like he knew I was lying, but he didn't press. Just past 9 p.m., a woman pulled in driving a dented blue pickup. She was older, maybe late 40s, wearing a name tag that read Peggy. I didn't even ask. She took one look at me, leaned out her window, and said, "You look like you could use a booth and a hot plate." I nodded, got in, never looked back. She dropped me at a diner near Rifle, told me she'd be back for the late shift after 2 a.m. I sat in a corner booth, and the waitress, same age, same energy, gave me a sandwich without asking if I could pay. When I tried to explain, she just waved it off and said, "Don't worry about it. Happens more than you think." I didn't sleep much that night, but the vinyl booth was soft enough, and I kept my head down. I told the waitress my parents were nearby. "They're just arguing. I didn't want to be in the way." She nodded like she'd heard that before. I don't think she believed me, but she let me be. By sunrise, I'd mapped out a plan on the back of a napkin. How to get to Glenwood, which buses ran where, and what I could possibly do to buy myself more time. I never called anyone. I didn't cry. I carried the shame like a secret badge, something sharp and folded, hidden in the lining of my jacket. The napkin I held now, years later in my office, was the same one I'd used to map my escape. I'd kept it all this time without even knowing. I slid it gently into a file labeled Personal Reference and stood still for a moment, breathing in the quiet. The weight of old things can surprise you. Eventually, I returned to my desk, where renderings for a new cafe design waited on my screen. My studio had grown slowly, from redesigns in local bakeries to full build-outs for clients who didn't blink at 5-figure invoices. No loans, no co-signers, no family funds. No one helped me, but no one stood in my way either. And that had been enough. Until Marjorie came through the studio doors like nothing had ever happened. It was 4 years ago, late summer. She wore a blazer that screamed tenure track, and her eyes scanned the space like she was judging a model home. She didn't say congratulations. She didn't say sorry. She said, "Wow, you really made something out of that, huh?" I raised an eyebrow. "Out of what?" "That little test," she said, like it was a shared memory. "Dad's idea. $5 and a life lesson." My face didn't move, but I felt something click. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't trying to apologize. She was proud. "You think that was character building?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "I mean, look at you, independent, successful. You should be thanking him." I almost laughed. Instead, I gestured to the door. "Some of us build alone, others just supervise." She left without another word. That night, I created a new folder. This one wasn't called Just in Case. It was labeled Proof They Always Knew. Inside, I added every piece of correspondence that hinted at their knowledge, their planning, their twisted pride. I created a document, blank but titled, The Beginning of My Side of the Story, and I saved it with a single keystroke, knowing I wasn't quite ready to write it yet, but I would be soon. The next morning, while sipping lukewarm coffee at my desk, my assistant poked her head into my office. Her voice was careful, like she was trying not to disturb a sleeping animal. "There's a woman named Delilah asking if you're available to meet. Says it's urgent." I didn't look up right away. I just closed the folder on my screen, proof they always knew, and took a slow breath. Did she give a last name? She said she didn't need to. Of course she did. 9 years. That's how long it had been since I'd heard my mother's voice. Not since she called to say, "You can't punish us forever. Eventually, you'll grow up and understand." Apparently, the growing up was one-sided. "Tell her I'm free in 30 minutes, I said, standing up and already reaching for the blazer hanging behind the door. When they arrived, yes, they both came, it wasn't with tears or regret. No shaky voices. No handwritten apology cards like the ones they used to send to church friends after public fights. No, Delilah walked in like she owned the room. Wendell followed, scanning the space like a man sizing up a business deal. "Wow," Delilah breathed. "You've really done well for yourself." I didn't offer coffee. I didn't even gesture toward the chairs. They sat anyway. Wendell leaned back like he'd helped build this place. Impressive square footage. And the light. Just beautiful. I waited. Delilah smoothed the hem of her blazer. "We were thinking, maybe it's time we started fresh, as a family." "Fresh," I repeated. She nodded. "You've built something amazing here. What if we contributed to the next phase? A shared space. Your work, our name. It'd be symbolic." Wendell chimed in. "Legacy matters. Imagine our name on one of your properties. A family restoration project, you could say." I didn't answer. I just studied them. Their faces. The way Wendell's eyes flicked toward the glass trophy near the door. The way Delilah's hands hovered over her bag, like she might pull out a brochure. This wasn't a peace offering. This was a pitch. "You know," Wendell added, smiling just enough, "we gave you your first push. That rest stop, that was your origin story, wasn't it?" It took everything in me not to laugh. He said it like he was proud, like ditching your daughter on the side of a highway with $5 and a vague sense of justice had been some brilliant parenting move. I kept my face still. "Thanks for coming," I said, "but I don't do retroactive partnerships, especially not ones rooted in guilt." Delilah's smile faltered. "You're still angry." "I'm not angry," I said calmly. "I'm alert." They left a few minutes later. Not a slammed door, not a single insult. Just Wendell's final comment as they reached the elevator. "Don't forget who taught you to survive." The next afternoon, I received an email. No subject line, just a scanned document. My name was not on the estate anymore. Delilah and Wendell had revised their will. Marjorie was listed. So was a family friend from church. Me? I was omitted due to sustained estrangement and failure to uphold relational support. I wasn't supposed to see it. But someone, I still don't know who, sent it to me from a masked email. They'd already written me out. Now they were just making it official. I didn't cry. There wasn't a dramatic moment where I slid to the floor, gasping like the heroine in a made-for-TV movie. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop, in case they try again. Inside, I started logging everything. The visit, the pitch, the estate change, copies of client contracts they might try to tie themselves to. I knew how they operated. They didn't fight fair, they rewrote. That evening, I dialed my lawyer. "This isn't about inheritance," I told him. "It's about narrative. Let's talk about reputation clauses." He didn't even ask for clarification. "You ready to draw a line?" I looked at the screen still glowing in front of me. My name, my company, my work. All of it built from the ashes of that $5 lesson. "No," I said. "I'm ready to carve it in stone." The following Thursday, just after I wrapped a design consult with a local bookstore, my phone buzzed with a Google alert. I was walking to my car, still half thinking about shelving dimensions and vintage light fixtures, when the headline hit me like a slap. Daughter abandons aging parents after fame and fortune. Subheadline: We raised her right. We just didn't realize she'd rewrite the truth. The article wasn't from a major outlet, just a blog, one of those community-run sites with too many ads and a comment section full of retirees, conspiracy theorists, and well-meaning strangers. But the reach wasn't the problem. It was what it said. They painted me as a selfish opportunist, a once troubled teen who had been rescued by loving, strict parents, only to toss them aside the moment she made a name for herself. "After all we did for her," the article quoted, supposedly from Delilah, "she cut us off. Cold. No calls, no birthdays, just a wall." The part that stunned me the most wasn't the lie. It was how well written the lie was. Polished. Strategic. It was clear. They didn't just want to discredit me. They wanted to replace my version with theirs. By the time I pulled into the garage, my inbox was a battlefield. Emails from local partners asking for clarification. A canceled meeting. Even my assistant had texted, "Let me know if you want me to pull our brand mentions off the main page until this blows over." I didn't respond. I needed a moment to breathe, to think before I spoke. That had always been the difference between me and them. I waited. I didn't flail. I calculated. By nightfall, the blog post had been reshared over a dozen times in community forums and small business Facebook groups. People who'd never met me had formed opinions about me. Ungrateful. Typical millennial. Another narcissist built by TikTok hustle culture. And then, nestled in the middle of the pile, was a comment from someone I vaguely remembered from high school. "Didn't her parents abandon her at a rest stop or something?" Reply, "No, that was a misunderstanding. It was a teaching moment. Kids today are so dramatic." I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But I opened my social app and started typing. Then I stopped, deleted it, typed again, paused. Finally, I posted this. I was left at a rest stop with $5. I didn't forget. They just assumed I would stay quiet. That was it. No hashtags, no dramatic punctuation, just truth, undecorated. The response was slow at first. A few likes. One heart. Then the messages started. Some were kind. A few were people who knew the family, who apologized for staying silent. One message came from a woman who used to teach Sunday school at our old church. "I knew something wasn't right back then. I'm sorry I didn't say anything." Another from a cousin. "If you need someone to speak up, I will. You were always the strong one, even when we didn't deserve your strength." But for every voice of support, there was someone parroting the lie. "Sounds like someone's bitter they didn't get their inheritance. Maybe she just hates being held accountable. So dramatic. Who leaves a kid with only $5? That's ridiculous." It would have been laughable if it hadn't been so infuriating. I was ready for the noise. What I wasn't expecting was the envelope that arrived the next day. A courier dropped it off at the front desk of my studio. Inside, a formal cease and desist from Delilah and Wendell's attorney. The letter accused me of defamation, emotional manipulation, and intentional character sabotage. I read it twice, then set it down without blinking. My lawyer called an hour later. "Want to respond now, or wait until they escalate?" I smiled for the first time in days. "Oh, we're not responding. We're preparing." I forwarded him the blog post, the screenshots, the comment threads. I added a copy of the letter to the "In Case They Try Again" folder, now bloated with layers of their orchestrated truth. This wasn't about who had the louder voice anymore. It was about who had the receipts. I wasn't angry in the way people expect. No shouting, no slamming doors. My rage was cold, organized, labeled, cross-referenced, and I wasn't waiting to be rescued. I was building my case, line by line. They had taught me how to endure, but I had taught myself how to speak. And this time, I wasn't staying quiet. He didn't realize. This wasn't me making a mistake. This was me marking the line they'd already crossed. The next morning, just after 8 a.m., Mia came into my office carrying a slim stack of printed pages. Her eyes said more than her mouth ever could. She placed them on my desk without a word, and just stood there, arms crossed, lips tight. I picked up the first page and scanned it. Fabricated emails, dozens of them, sent from fake accounts using variations of my name. Messages laced with profanity and threats, addressed to clients, collaborators, even a vendor I'd only spoken to once. Some claimed I'd refused to pay invoices. One said I berated an elderly customer in front of staff. None of it was true. Then came the Yelp reviews, anonymous, but strategically timed. One claimed I'd verbally assaulted my aging mother in public. Another accused me of exploiting trauma for profit. It was too calculated to be coincidence. I looked up. When did these start going out? Mia replied, 3 days ago, but yesterday's batch hit harder. Someone copied your exact email signature and CC'd our company account. One of our investors flagged it this morning. I thanked her and told her to call IT. By 9:30, I had my head of security and our lead tech on a video call. We dug into IP origins, headers, server trails. Most were routed through VPNs, but a few slipped, careless, maybe rushed. 2 messages came from an IP address linked to a residential Comcast account in Fort Collins, my parents' house. I didn't call them. I didn't send a text. Instead, I clicked open my legal folder, made a new subfile titled Digital Defamation, and began uploading everything. They didn't want peace. They wanted control. And now, they were pushing into a space I'd built with my own breath, trying to poison it from the inside. They thought I'd freeze, that I'd stay quiet, that I'd protect them again. But that version of me was long gone. I pulled a storage box from my bottom drawer. Inside, sealed in a weathered envelope, was the vending machine receipt from that day. The day they left me. Yellowed edges. A light crease down the middle. On the back, still legible in her handwriting, $5. Don't screw it up. I hadn't shown that to anyone. Until now. I scanned both sides, saved the file under a new label. Origins. It was more than a receipt. It was the first record in a timeline of erasure, proof that they hadn't just abandoned me. They'd documented it like a joke. My lawyer called that afternoon. I forwarded the fake emails, screenshots, and the Yelp links. Within 2 hours, he sent back a draft of our response. Cease and desist. Formal accusation of reputational sabotage. Defamation with intent to damage business interests. He asked if I wanted to review it before sending. No, I said. Make it public. Let them see what lines look like when they're written in legal ink. He didn't flinch. You know this is going to escalate. I'm counting on it. We filed the letter by 5 p.m. That evening, I stayed at the office. I wasn't hiding. I was anchoring. This was my ground, my building, my name on the wall. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. Voicemail. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut knew. I hit play. Wendell's voice came through, hoarse and slurred. He sounded like he was halfway through a bottle and not planning to stop. You think this ends with a letter? He said. You think dragging us into court makes you the hero? There was a pause. Breathing. A muttered curse I couldn't make out. You've made a mistake, Leora. You're not as untouchable as you think. Then the line went dead. I listened again, this time with less emotion. The voice I used to shrink under had lost its weight. I forwarded the message to my lawyer, added a copy to the folder, and then, for the first time in months, I turned off the office lights and drove home with the windows down. The air wasn't clean, but it was mine. The air was still sharp from the drive home. I hadn't turned on music, no distractions, just the hum of tires on pavement and that voicemail echoing in my head like a warning I'd already outgrown. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse early. Black pantsuit, hair pinned back, no makeup beyond the essentials. This wasn't about performance, it was about record. When I stepped inside, the building felt colder than usual. Not in temperature, more in tone, like even the walls were holding their breath. My lawyer met me near security with a quiet nod. No small talk, no posturing. We filed the case just after 9 a.m. Leora Ray vs. Delilah and Wendell Ray charges: defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, business interference, online identity manipulation. By noon, the court docket was public, and within hours, the vultures started circling. Local outlets picked it up first, then blogs. Then someone on Twitter made a thread dissecting every scrap of online mess tied to my name for the past 6 months. All the fake emails, the timing of the Yelp reviews, the anonymous interviews in parenting forums. It unraveled quickly. And of course, Delilah and Wendell had a counter-move ready. That night, a glossy article hit the front page of a local magazine. When families fracture, a heartbroken mother's plea for peace, the cover photo was staged. Delilah seated at a garden table, holding a coffee mug like it weighed 10 pounds. Wendell behind her, hand on her shoulder, like they'd been living in a Hallmark card. The interview was everything I expected. Quotes about unconditional love, about daughters forgetting where they came from. Wendell said, "We never raised our voices. All we ever asked for was respect." Then came Marjorie, on livestream. The same sister who smirked at the rest stop, who praised the lesson years later. "She always misunderstood us," she said smoothly. "Our parents did the best they could. They gave her structure. She turned that into resentment." People ate it up. The wounded daughter versus well-meaning parents narrative. Clean, convenient, familiar. But I didn't flinch. I didn't even respond, not directly. Instead, my legal team posted a link to a Dropbox folder labeled "The Story They Never Told." Inside were 4 files. File 1, a scanned vending machine receipt, dated, time-stamped, location tagged. File 2, a screenshot of a text from Delilah, years later. "Let's see how long it takes you to get home. Don't call your aunt." File 3, property records for my studio, every penny documented, no co-signers, no family help. File 4, the video. Wendell, sitting in a folding chair at a barbecue, red Solo cup in hand. A friend behind the camera asking, "So what happened with Leora again?" He laughs, slaps his knee. "Left her with $5 and a soda. Told her to figure it out. Best damn parenting move I ever made. That shut her up real good for a while." Silence. Then laughter. He looks straight into the camera. "She'll thank me one day." The clip spread like wildfire. By the following afternoon, hashtags started showing up. $5 daughters, just character building, gone wrong. Taught, not loved. People started writing in. My inbox, once full of sponsorships and contracts, became a landing pad for stories. A teacher who was forced to walk home in the rain for forgetting her trumpet. A nurse whose dad locked her out for being 5 minutes late. A grandmother who still remembered being left at a bus station in '64. Not everyone believed me, but enough did. Support poured in, not with pity, but with recognition. Then my lawyer called again. "They've filed a new claim, counter-lawsuit, citing filial responsibility." I almost laughed. "Let me guess, emotional abandonment?" "Exactly. They're alleging neglect of parental care in their senior years." Of course they were. They couldn't win by narrative. So they pivoted to legality. But what they didn't realize was this. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. "Perfect," I said. "Let's put it all on record." He paused. "You sure?" "They wanted to use law like a club. I'll use it like a scalpel." That night, I poured myself a glass of water, walked out onto my balcony, and stared out over Denver. Neon signs blinking in the distance, horns echoing low from a nearby freeway. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for every daughter who was told that abandonment was a lesson, that silence was strength, that bruises were blessings in disguise. The truth wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. The sky was already beginning to turn when I got the call from my attorney. His voice was steady, but there was a tightness behind it, one I'd come to recognize over the years. The kind of tone people use when they're trying to tell you something ugly without making it sound dramatic. "They've filed the suit," he said. Of course they did, I replied, pulling off the freeway and into the courthouse parking lot. What's the angle? Colorado's filial responsibility clause. They're framing it as abandonment of duty, emotional and financial neglect of elderly parents. That's their claim. I let out a short breath through my nose. Not quite a laugh. Not quite disbelief. Just confirmation. This wasn't new ground for them. It was just a new costume. By the time I walked into the courtroom the next morning, the press had already arrived. Not many. Just enough to remind me that whatever happened inside wouldn't stay there for long. Delilah and Wendell sat at the plaintiff's table like a couple from a retirement home brochure. Soft pastels, hands folded, eyes downcast. The performance was meticulous. Wendell wore reading glasses he didn't need. Delilah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before court was even in session. And then there was Marjorie. She didn't come to the courthouse, not physically, but her words were there, printed, distributed, and reshared. A letter on Medium. A headline that read, "When forgiveness is impossible, a sister speaks out." She wrote, "Leora's turned our family's quiet dysfunction into a public circus. She's monetized pain, rewritten memory, and abandoned people who only tried to shape her into someone strong enough for the world." The comments were mixed. Some praised her honesty. Others called it damage control. But the one that kept resurfacing said simply, "Imperfect parents don't leave kids on highways." That morning in court, I didn't bring a speech. I didn't practice lines. I brought facts. When it was time to testify, I stood slowly. Not timid, not bold, just grounded. "I'm not here to debate philosophy," I began. "This case isn't about whether parents are allowed to make mistakes. This is about rewriting guilt into law." I felt every pair of eyes in the room. They didn't raise me, they trained me, they tested me, and when I passed, when I survived, they claimed credit for the scars. I handed over exhibits, emails connecting them to the online defamation, a scan of the vending machine receipt with Delilah's note on the back, screenshots of texts discouraging me from asking extended family for help, a notarized statement from a therapist outlining the emotional pattern of coercive parenting, and finally, the video. Wendell laughing about the $5 drop-off, calling it the best move I ever made. It played for the room in silence. No soundtrack, no explanation. Just his voice, his words, his pride. I didn't look at my parents while it played. I looked at the judge. When the video ended, I closed the file gently. My parents didn't ask me to be kind. They demanded silence, and when I stopped giving them that, they called it betrayal. The courtroom was still when I sat down. The ruling came 2 days later. The court finds no legal basis to impose financial or emotional obligation upon the defendant. This is not a case of neglect. It is a dispute grounded in emotional history, not legal failure. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. I didn't stop. I didn't speak. That night, I posted a single sentence to my account. "Closure isn't peace, but it's a place to rest." The likes came fast. Then comments. Then DMs from strangers saying, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to reply. I didn't owe anyone a follow-up or a headline or an apology for surviving out loud. I stood in my kitchen, barefoot, holding a mug of tea gone cold, watching the sun dip past the rooftops. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was just stillness. And sometimes that's the closest thing to healing we ever get. And this time, I'm not looking back. I hadn't driven that stretch of I-70 in nearly 2 decades. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. Some roads leave more than tire marks, but on a cool, wind-bitten morning in late October, I turned the ignition, pulled onto the highway, and pointed myself west. No music, just the rhythm of the road and the quiet, knowing that I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't chasing closure. I was carrying it. The trees lining the route were yellowing, rust-colored leaves skipping across the pavement like small truths finally catching wind. I passed Rifle, slowed near Glenwood, and eventually pulled into a gravel lot that looked both unfamiliar and exactly the same. The rest stop. It had been upgraded, barely. New paint, trash bins with lids that weren't duct taped. The vending machines were updated, but the placement hadn't changed. They still sat on the left side of the building, near a picnic table that had once been my only company. But today, there was something new. A modest, clean shelter had been added. A small structure with open walls, a few benches, and a sign overhead. The return point. I stepped out of the car and walked slowly, heels crunching over leaves, until I stood in front of the kiosk. I didn't need to look around. No ghosts were waiting in the corners anymore. Just wind and sky and what I chose to bring with me. I reached into my coat pocket and ran my fingers across the edge of the folded deed. It was mine now. Legally, entirely. Purchased under a non-profit initiative I had formed with quiet intent and no press release. The only press involved had come last week when a local newspaper stopped by to ask about the shelter. I had declined an interview. "This isn't about me," I'd told them. "It's about making sure someone else doesn't get left behind." I didn't mention the $5. I didn't mention the day. I didn't need to. Inside the shelter, there were small lockers for free hygiene kits, a map of public transportation lines, and vending machines that dispense snacks and bottled water. No payment required. Above one machine was a plaque that read, "For anyone who was left, may you find your way forward." I stood there for a long time, reading that sentence over and over. It wasn't meant to be poetic. It was just true. Footsteps behind me were soft, but I recognized them before I turned. Ramona. My aunt hadn't spoken to me since the court ruling. We'd exchanged a few messages, but nothing that felt like resolution. Still, there she was. Gray cardigan, hands folded in front of her, a worn envelope tucked under one arm. We didn't hug. She didn't cry. She simply walked up, placed the envelope on the bench near the vending machine, and sat down without a word. I followed. A few minutes passed before I reached for the envelope. Inside was a copy of the original complaint Delilah and Wendell had filed against me, now stamped in bold red, "Case dismissed." No note, no commentary, just the truth, handed back. Ramona didn't explain how she got it. I didn't ask. We sat quietly, letting the wind do the talking. Eventually, she glanced over. "I saw what you built here." I nodded. "It's good," she added. "It's right." That was all. No apologies. No retroactive defense. Just recognition. And sometimes that's the most someone can give when they weren't strong enough to fight for you before. We parted without ceremony. She headed toward her car. I stayed behind. There was one more thing I needed to do. I walked over to the stone slab near the edge of the lot, still cracked, still sitting just off the pavement like it had been waiting for something. I crouched down, reached into my purse, and pulled out a small folded bill. $5. I tucked it beneath the rock, not to honor the lesson, but to mark the distance between who I was and who I had become. No note, no explanation, just that simple offering. I stood, exhaled slowly, and walked back to my car. I didn't look back when I drove off. I didn't need to. Some people spend their whole lives waiting for someone to come back and say, "I'm sorry." I built a place where people could move forward without needing to hear it, and that, for me, was enough. Sometimes healing isn't about grand gestures or picture-perfect reunions. It's about reclaiming what was stolen: your voice, your dignity, your right to be the narrator of your own life. If you've ever been told to stay quiet, to be the bigger person, or that family is everything, even when that family hurt you, you're not alone. I spent years trying to earn love from people who saw me as a reflection of their control, not as a person. But survival taught me this: you don't owe anyone access to you just because you share DNA. Your peace is not selfish. Your boundaries are not betrayal. And walking away doesn't make you cold. It makes you brave. Now I want to ask you, have you ever had to choose distance over connection for the sake of your own mental and emotional safety? Have you ever been made to feel guilty for protecting your peace? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home for you. or tell me where you're watching from. I love knowing how far these stories travel. And if you didn't connect with this video, I'm open to hearing that too. What didn't work for you? What would you like to see more of? And if you're still with me, thank you. Truly. If this story moved you or reminded you of your own journey, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what's next. I share stories like this to remind people that survival is not the end. Sometimes it's just the beginning. See you in the next story.